Hey everybody, welcome to Raising Vibrations, and you're with Simon today. So today's video is Mercury direct, and what I want to talk to you about today in this video is just kind of the sense of how this is materializing on the collective, and how this Mercury retrograde is very significant within the context of the way that we as human beings are reordering ourselves on this planet at the moment. So just to kind of manage some expectations here, the roadmap of today involves me talking about the significance of Pluto and how that has been impacting us as a civilization, as a human race. I want to then talk about how Mercury direct here in Capricorn specifically, that is conjunct Pluto, has a very strong, significant impact on this Pluto story that I'm going to outline for us. And then I want to talk about the nature of endangerment as a response to trauma. And then I'm going to summarize this all and show you how what you see on the global stage right now is very much a representation of Mercury going direct, but also how we are as a human race right now kind of very much being pulled and turned in directions that we have never considered were actually possible up until this last 10 years of our lives. So that's the intention today, that's the focus. I'll put up the chart at some point within this conversation, but today really I'm going to be talking and sharing with you about things that I see and kind of addressing some reflections of how the astrology is materializing itself. Okay, so that's the kind of focus today. So Pluto, what Pluto represents, okay, is the deepest unconscious memory of things. Okay, so right at the bottom of something, the sediments at the bottom of the ocean, the material that settles, right, at the bottom of a kettle, right, a kettle. And when you use the kettle a lot, right, at the bottom of the kettle, there's this kind of sediments that form. So think of Pluto as the layer of psychic awareness that reflects the things that we are processing that are very intense and that we put to the back of our sort of psychic room, and we leave it there, okay? And the themes that can be associated with Pluto is things like where we've had a very intense experience and we would rather not want to talk about it. So things that are not on the surface but really at the deeper layer of our subconscious. What Pluto does is it moves across that area and it brings it to the surface for us to look at and to process. And ultimately here, it's an attempt to reintegrate that which has been disintegrated, right? That which has been fractured. It also brings to the surface things that no longer are alive. So we can think of in our society where Pluto is in Capricorn, we notice that there is a tremendous amount of reordering around what is socially acceptable to say and what is not. Okay? We're reordering the way that we interact with each other and recognize what we feel we want in a culture or not. And the way that this is happening is that Pluto is essentially bringing a lot of suffering and pain and unprocessed material to the surface. 2020 was one of those years where a tremendous amount of that material came to the surface. We had Saturn and Jupiter transiting through Pluto in Capricorn at that time. So at the core of what's happening now in the world, internally within us, and of course outwardly, is that Mercury has sort of moved into Aquarius, and then it went into a retrograde pattern just over 3 weeks ago, and it's moved all into Aquarius, and then it's come back into Capricorn. And it's brought that Aquarius energy into the structure of Capricorn. Okay, So that's been its path. And Mercury, what Mercury does is it's like the nerves that are in your body, okay? The nerve endings. And it is also the way that your hand is able to move when I tell it to move using my brain, right? So I'll say to my hand, okay, now it's time to move, and I'll move it. There's a synapsis that occurs there, right? There's a network, a neural network that takes place between the intention that I set within my mind space and then moving the nerves in my body for this to exist. And Mercury is where that information travels. So Mercury is essentially bringing things from the beneath to the surface for us to talk about. So two things that have recently happened with this Mercury retrograde that are deeply significant in terms of our creative process. Okay. One, you see this current dynamic that's taking place with somebody like Joe Rogan, Spotify, and people choosing to, where do they side? And a great deal of this Mercury direct for us has been getting clear on what types of values we wish to subscribe to, and what do those values and resources that we subscribe to and belong to or associate with, how do we communicate them? Mercury. That's what this Mercury direct is. It's like, where do we draw the line within ourselves and where do we stand? So on the surface, what you see is a manifestation of this psychic energy that we've been carrying around for a long time, where we've been trying to process, what are the new rules that we wish to have as a society? Okay. So when Pluto moves through Capricorn, which it has been doing since 2018, it's been revealing to us, right, bringing things to the surface, what of our society do we wish to not take with us going forward? And so those questions have played themselves out in the collective world, where we've tried to figure out how we're going to move forward, where we need to understand different ethnic backgrounds, okay? And we want to reorder the way that we communicate that. That's just one example. We've also had something like an Aquarius energy come through, and all of a sudden we have an explosion of podcasts. Everybody does a podcast. This is kind of Aquarius, right? Everybody's talking about things. And one of the things that has become really big within the context of our space is somebody like Joe Rogan. And the theme around that has a lot to do with Mercury, information. Okay? And what I'm trying to get you is that it's not so much about the surface, it's about what is the kinetic energy that is existing beneath the surface that this Mercury direct has brought to the surface. And these two people, right, the Joe Rogan, Spotify artists that are choosing their lines, that is just a manifestation of what is essentially beneath. Okay, that's that Mercury function that is bringing it to the surface, and it's being embodied within the contents of the people who are acting out, essentially, the energy that is existing at a psychic level. So there's non-form energy, or there's non-embodied energy, and then there's embodied energy. And at the top, the embodied energy is what we see in the outside world, but obviously what's percolating beneath the surface. So what we see now is a very clear sense of Mercury moving from Aquarius into Capricorn, and on one side you see somebody choose to free themselves from an attachment, Aquarius, from, say, Spotify, right? Certain artists are saying, nope, I don't want to participate in this. And then you see other people who are reforging their attachments to sort of the message that Spotify has chosen to do and Joe Rogan's going to do. And again, it's not about those two people or these themes. It's about what's actually occurring deep within the psychic layer of our collective. And we're trying to figure out how we will want to establish new structure going forward as a world. When civilizations change or reorder themselves, the things that are perceived as taboo when they are formed primarily come from a few things. And one of them is we don't know how to process the complexity of that which we don't understand. And so therefore we sideline it to a place and we say collectively in a consensus way, this is really difficult to process. We don't say that with our words. We go, that's bad. Don't do that. Right? So we sideline it, it becomes taboo. And societies create boundaries around things that they're comfortable to process and that which they don't. And these value structures are formed based on the idea of how a society wants to rule itself. When Pluto moves through Capricorn, it brings these things into question. It says, are these outdated? Do they serve a purpose in relation to the current time that we live in or not? So right now we are in a huge revolution with regards to the way that we understand our place, not in the context of the cultural society, but also internally within ourselves. And that's why you see a huge like a huge difference take place between those that side on this side and those that side on that side, those that side this way and those that side this way. And ultimately what the energy is really doing is just kind of like, it's very complex, of course, but in a simple way, it is bringing you into deeper, clearer understanding of your own value structure. And this Mercury retrograde, now going direct, has brought to the surface for us to embody through these positions of the Joe Rogan thing, and also what's happening in Canada at the moment with regards to the convoy, and how media is portraying it a certain way, Mercury, and how the image that is existing with the people that are actually living the experience differently. So you have these alternative sources of information saying, actually, the reality of this is that these people are operating in a certain way. And then the media is also saying, hey, this is how we want to portray it. And so there's that Mercury engine. It's like, where is that information going? How do we process that information? And that's the key here. That's the thing I want to share with you today, is that remember that when you're looking at these things in the outside world, understand them as patterns that are forming essentially pre the outside world. They are forming internally in the psychic space of our collective awareness. And we are trying to process the reordering of the way that we want to move forward in relation to the time that we live in right now. And these scenarios that are showing up is essentially provoking people to try to figure out where they stand internally, but also what types of new taboos do we want to form and have within the context of our culture. And that leads me to endangerment. So Pete Walker highly recommends that you go check out Pete Walker. I'll put the link in the description in terms of his website. He's a psychotherapist that worked for a very long time understanding complex post-traumatic stress, and also works with basically healing where we have been affected negatively by experiences, right, our wounds. And one of the things that he noted was that when we experience sensations of endangerment, okay, so before I go into this, let me just kind of cultivate this. Children are hardwired biologically to sense danger, right? And one of the main reasons why this is the case is because in times that we lived in prior to this, animals, the nature was a very dangerous place. And without protection from parents, it's a very scary place. It's a lot of chaos, right? Life is chaos in many ways. It's very uncertain. And that's really, really difficult for us to accept and to process, that life is very endangering. We live comfortably in certain ways in the West over here, but there's always a tremendous amount of unpredictability. And we form internal messages within ourselves that help us protect ourselves from things that we sense are endangered. And one of those things is chaos, and particularly the uncertainty of how things are occurring. And we are living in a time where there is a tremendous amount of uncertainty and unpredictability. And so what merges out of our communication is what is called an outer critic. And this outer critic is what forms the endangerment process and the unconscious projections of our own unmet safety needs, our own ability to grapple with the intensity of life. And my concern, and this is why I'm promoting doing as much trauma work as possible, is because, and healing these things, because when we act from these unconscious spaces, what happens is we develop language, Mercury conjunct Pluto, that forms protection mechanisms. And these protection mechanisms essentially speak to the external locus of control. We try to control things outside of ourselves. And right now, we are living in a world where we're trying to figure out the complexity of this new change while trying to figure out how to organize ourselves in a way where we can, align with what we consider to be that which we cannot process because it's too complex, and that which we need to protect ourselves from because of the nature of our internal sense of endangerment. And so this Mercury retrograde plus going back to Pluto, conjuncting Pluto, is an invitation for us to look at the things within ourselves and to ask us where we may carry messages within us that protect us from uncertainty, chaos, and that where we may project that message onto other people or into the world. And we may say something along the lines of, it's really scary that, this pandemic has taken place, of course, naturally. And if I see somebody that responds in a way that is not in alignment with my sense of safety, I may tell that person that they're being an idiot. And this is kind of the thing that infuses in the way that we communicate and establish these new boundaries, structures as we move forward. So the invitation with this message today with Mercury Direct is to look at your own language structure and messaging and see where you sense that there is a feeling of endangerment within yourself. And before you begin to look at where you need to protect yourself, ask yourself, where can you look at those patterns and give the necessary healing that is necessary for us. And this is a time, I'm just looking at my notes over here, this is a time where there is an ability to reform, reorder, and reestablish a deeper impact with regards to the way that we can talk and communicate. And a lot of the time we miss the ability to meet people emotionally where they are because we're afraid of the complexity of the world. We're afraid of what they represent to us at an ego level. So observe where internally within yourself there are still structures that may hold this pattern of endangerment. Notice where you may be connecting in ways that other people looks at the experience of the world and it brings to the forefront uncertainty, and so that we respond from that. Mercury Direct here is an opportunity for us to begin to re-language going forward the things that we may have never understood before. And what you want to do within yourself, to have agency within yourself, is the capacity to tap into where your boundaries exist and what you're capable of dealing with and not. And then consistently working internally with that. So that's my Mercury Direct message for you today. I really hope that you found some value in this process. As always, if you found this video to be valuable, you can always subscribe to it. Let us know through the likes. And also share this video for any person that you feel could be supported by what I'm sharing with you today. Okay? All right, so everyone, thanks very much for listening as always. I hope you have an amazing day. And until the next video, take care. Bye-bye.